Hello and welcome. I'm Ramona Benson and this is The Real Talk. Today we'll be bringing you what's happened in this recent PC party leadership event. Every week we'll bring you topics about the latest news and highlights and get into depth about what happened behind the scenes. Without further ado, we actually have a special guest today. His name is Joe Reese, and who Joe Reese is actually, he's been involved as a political strategist for about over 23 years, on the federal side as well as on the provincial side. On the federal side, he's the president of the Don Valley West EDA. He won the Campaign Manager Award in 2006 and actually was given to him by Prime Minister Stephen Harper's wife, Laureen Harper, in 2016. And on the provincial side, he has been the candidate training chair in terms of training all the candidates for the provincial election. And just recently, he was the director of field operations on the Doug Ford campaign. So what I'll do is I'll introduce Joe Reese and bring him on the phone because we have some questions for him about what happened in this PC party election and how did that contribute to Doug Ford's win. Hello, Joe.
Hello, Ramona. Nice to be here.
Well, thank you for joining us today. Joe, you must be excited and maybe a bit tired, but the celebrations?
I think I took it in my stride. For me, it was never in doubt. I believe we had the best candidate, and I think we managed an absolutely superb campaign.
Absolutely. I mean, it was 6 weeks. So we started the new year, you know, just shortly after the new year, what happened with, you know, the PC party leader, Patrick Brown, and the shocking revelations, one after the other. So what happened in that 6 weeks that prompted Doug Ford to be the first candidate to announce?
But actually, we were putting together a team that couldn't actually be named until May, because that's legislation, for Doug to be the mayor of Toronto. Now, I say to people who brought that up to me during the campaign, how could he jump from being the mayor of Toronto to being the premier of the province? I said, you know, it's not that the city needed him less, but that the province needed him more. And therefore, it was a very simple, easy decision for us to make. And I remember we had the first meeting on the Sunday night, 6 weeks ago. And Doug declared on Monday at 6 o'clock, 6 a.m., that he was going to be running. He had all the right attributes, and even though I think we ran the best campaign, I must say Tanya Granick Allen had the best slogan.
What was her slogan again? I don't recall it.
It was conservative for a change.
Conservative
leader for a change.
Yes. I know that, you know, what the PC party went through in terms of a complete makeover, you know, under Patrick Brown's leadership, you know, it did affect some of the base. So when she came in, I think she amazed everybody. But just for our viewers, we'll do a rundown. So Doug Ford announced first, and then followed by Christine Elliott, who announced over her Twitter that she's in, and then came back into the fold from, you know, being away for the last few years. When she left provincial politics. And then we had Caroline Mulroney, that was rumored to have wanted to join the race. She came in third. And then, lo and behold, Tanya Allen Granick, who didn't have name recognition like the other three candidates, came in, and I think her first foray into provincial politics and, you know, provincial news was that first debate.
Right. Well, let me get back to how Doug got into the race and how we progressed through the 6 weeks. First of all, I did believe that Doug would be the best candidate. I thought he had all the attributes. He's a born leader, and he's a conservative. So the first thing we had to do, having got the best candidate, was to define him. And therefore, to define him as the conservative in the race, we first of all looked at the carbon tax that the left wing had brought in and imposed on us, and we decided that we would get rid of that tax.
Absolutely, he was the first one.
So that's the first conservative thing. And then, yeah, he was the first one to say it. Don't forget, he was the first one in the race. Now, we will never know if the others would have done that as well, but in this era of Me Too, we found a lot of Me Too. Because as Doug said, I will get rid of the carbon tax, I heard Me Too, Me Too, Me Too. And I don't want to say anything bad about our candidates now because they're all united. I mean, the leadership race is over. So I prefer to concentrate on what Doug was doing. And so there he was,
Absolutely.
establishing himself as the Conservative candidate by saying, every tax is a bad tax and it's necessary. This tax is not necessary. It's gone. So that was number one. Number two, we looked at the sex ed curriculum. And, I like to say it's better to involve parents rather than perverts in writing this sex ed curriculum. And we felt that there was not enough parental involvement in the writing of that curriculum. There was no parental involvement. There was no consultation, regardless of what Kathleen claimed, and it was imposed. And we know that that is also a social conservative issue that we need to revisit.
Right. That attracted a big part of the base, the conservative base, to come back into the PC party fold, from what I understand.
Absolutely, because previously we had said that we would revisit this, and then we said we wouldn't, and then we said we would, and then we said we wouldn't, and people were fed up with flip-flopping. It's not normal for conservatives to be doing this. We stick to our principles. We are not the kind of people who say we have principles, and if you don't like those, we have some other principles. We have conservative principles, and we stick to them, and that is Doug Ford. And we also talked about balancing the budget, because that's a state of mind. If you set off to balance your budget, you have a very good chance of balancing the budget. If you start by saying you'll have a small deficit, and you'll only do it for 3 years, then you'll probably have a large deficit, and it won't be for 3 years.
So remind me again.
Calling no names, but looking at Justin Trudeau federally.
Right.
What's that? Sorry, Roman, I didn't get that.
I said, remind me again. Was he the only one who said he would balance the budget? Because I think I recall the other candidates saying that they might have to run a slight deficit to be able to run programs. But he said he aims to balancing the budget. Was there a time limit of when he would do that?
Immediately is the approach. We're going to balance the budget from year one. Now, if we get in there and we find the books are worse than we have been told, then perhaps it may take longer. But here's the problem. Here's the point. We set off with the mindset of balancing the budget. Once that mindset is there, you stand a better chance of balancing the budget than not.
Okay.
And that's where we're different to the others in the other party.
So here he comes, first into the race, setting the agenda on no carbon tax, which was going to be imposed under the People's Guarantee, which was the platform that was put forward by then leader Patrick Brown. And then he again talked about the sex ed curriculum, which was again an off-topic, a non-issue by the previous leader. And then the third item being balancing the budget, which is a complete conservative type of platform that actually, motivated the base. So tell me, Joe, in the 6 weeks of a campaign, what was the ground operations? Because your role was Director of Field Operations. What was done behind the scenes on the ground to give him the win that he got on Saturday?
Okay. Ramona, I am a firm believer that any campaign can be won. I have a track record. I have never lost a campaign. I've won provincial, I've won municipal. I won a campaign for Bob Soroya in 2015 federally in Markham Unionville.
Which is a conservative, who's a conservative MP today. So he won against the Liberal wave, correct? Yes,
for which I got that Doug Finley Award that you talked about earlier, and I'm proud of that, and that's why I stated, not just that I'm blowing my own horn. So I got into this campaign, and I looked at the rules. Now the rules follow the American system, and it's rules we adopted here in 1988. If I can just give my old friend Tony Clement a plug, he brought that in. It's simply this: for every riding, you have 100 points, which is distributed among the candidates in proportion to the votes they get in that riding. That's a very simple rule. The reason we do it is this: if you don't do that, then the regions that have more memberships, for whatever reason, they could determine the leader in 5 minutes.
Right. So like Brampton that has 3,000 members.
We had a Brampton write-in that had 18,000 memberships.
18,000. Okay.
18,000 memberships.
Wow.
There was another one in Mississauga with 19,000 memberships. So if it was one man, or as Trudeau would have us say, one person, okay, one person, one vote, then obviously there would be a skewed distribution towards Mississauga, Brampton, determining who that leader would be. And remember, on the federal side, we use the same model.
Right.
And the reason is when we merged the two parties back in 2003 or 4, or 2003, I think it was, we would have had the same thing happening. If we had one man, one vote, Alberta would have determined the leader. And therefore, it was necessary to spread the points in an electoral college system throughout the province or throughout the country. So throughout the province in this case, we have 124 ridings, and each riding gets 100 points. Now, there's a tiny exception here on the provincial side, in that if your riding has fewer than 100 votes, then you will get fewer than 100 points. So if, for example, you have only 30 votes in one riding, in a particular riding,
right,
then instead of getting 100 points, only 30 points would be distributed between the 4 candidates.
So it's fair. So the 30 points wouldn't account to if you get one vote there, 3 points. So that was fair in that sense.
Correct. We tried to argue that as well, but when we had merged, I remember Peter McKay from the PC side insisting that we have 100 points regardless of the size or regardless of the number of members in the riding. But the principle is the same. So you have 100 points in each riding. Now, Ramona, you know, to me it wasn't rocket science. I'm not going to stand here today and tell you we won the popular vote. It sounds like Hillary Clinton.
Yes, it sounds like the American elections, actually.
With
the electoral vote and the popular vote. That's the part I meant.
Absolutely. Now, I don't care if you win the popular vote. It might mean that you won those 2 Mississauga and Brampton ridings we talked about. But having won those, you get 100 points. So if for example, kicking off, you've got 18,000 in a riding, and let's suppose you have no support there whatsoever, and you've got limited resources, and you can only, let's say, raise 200 memberships, then what would be the point of getting the 200 memberships in that riding that already has 18,000 members?
Right.
You'll have 18,200 members, and you'll end up with a quarter of a point if the entire 200 members actually manage to get the ballot.
Exactly.
So that is not what I did. I restricted my scarce resources to those ridings that had fewer members. In England, we call that rotten boroughs. But I'm sure there's a name for it here in North America.
Yes, boroughs are ridings, areas. So essentially the strategy was you have the entire province to target. Let's go target the ridings out of the 124 that have the least amount of members, so you can get those points if you can convert them to a Doug Ford supporter or identify them as a Doug Ford supporter.
Absolutely. Now, I have to believe that the other 3 candidates were doing the same thing. I have no idea. I wasn't involved in their campaign.
Okay.
But I would like to assume that they did the same thing, in which case I would have to say, well, we must have done it more effectively. Now, I know I kept changing what were my target ridings. As we got memberships into a riding, I felt, well, it's enough for now. And if you're looking at the return per limiting factor, which is either time or resource, then you have to switch. You have to switch your emphasis from one riding to another as that happens.
As you understand what the memberships look like. But because just for the viewers,
not only on a daily basis, but on an hourly basis.
Right. Just for the viewers, I want to describe what the process was like. So there was a duration of time where there was a cutoff for paper memberships for people who wanted to become a member of the PC party, pay $10 to be able to vote. So paper memberships meaning accepting cash. Then there was another week, the following week, that was memberships only online, which you'd have to have a credit card for and go right to the PC party website. After that, when that closed, then all the candidates, their campaigns, got the full number of memberships per riding to be able to see what happens. But then that wasn't just it. Members couldn't just vote. They had to wait for the mail, the post, the snail mail to arrive to their home, where they would have a verification pin, and the verification pin, they would have to go online and verify their identity, such as their name, as it is on their ID, their government-issued ID, their address, and all the details. Once when they submit their verification, they had to wait to see their verification was approved. Some people whose verification wasn't approved, they had to actually do the verification again. Once the verification was approved, then they received an email with their PIN to cast their ballot, which is a vote, all online. So throughout this entire process, you're seeing which ridings are changing memberships, which ones have been verified, which ones are now able to vote. So it's a big process and so many different variables in such a short period of time.
Absolutely, but that's what it took. And I was very ably aided by my two co-directors in this area. This is Cosette, Gianni, and George Hatsis. They understood the system like I did. And we, between the three of us, we looked at the 124 ridings. We carved them up. We went after the target ridings. And the target ridings were removable seats. As I said, we got enough members in one riding, enough people that voted in our riding, we switched to another riding. Rather than trying to get an extra 1 point in a riding, we were trying to start by getting 50 points in another riding.
Okay.
And when we brought that down to 1, we moved on and so on. Now, the system itself had a few problems. I'm not going to lie to you and I'm not going to dwell on it. I'm not sure why we had these problems. I'm sure that the party will be looking into these problems and why they arose. And if, to the extent that they're controllable, I'm sure they'll take corrective action. Absolutely. And if we have to use this system again, I'm sure it will be better orchestrated, better run. Nonetheless, so that's the first part of the strategy. The second part of the strategy is this. The system we're using for electing a leader is not first past the post, like we do in provincial or federal elections.
Exactly.
It's called a preferential, a single preferential transferable ballot, which means that as there are 4 candidates in the race, you take the, everyone has to, can vote 1, 2, 3, 4.
Right, there's 4 options for all the voters to decide if they would just want to put one or they want to rank the 4 candidates in order.
Right, so the first thing you do is you do a tally of all the number 1s. So you establish which candidate has the most first votes. The most is the first vote for most voters. Once you've done that, if one leader comes out of that as a majority, that means they've got 50% plus 1 of the total ballots cast, that person is declared the winner.
Right.
Should that not be the case, then you look at the person who has come last and you reapportion their votes in accordance with the vote's second choice wishes. So, for example, as in this case, Tanya came last, so you will take a Tanya vote, for example. Here's a vote, the ballot says Tanya won. The question is, who comes second? That vote is then attributed to the person whose second choice it was.
And from what we understand, about almost 85% of her second choices was for Doug Ford. So when Tanya came off the ballot on the 4th, as 4th place, all her second choices were then given to Doug Ford.
And that was very good for Doug Ford. And we had worked out in our strategy that we needed 80%. And so we got 82%. And so we felt, tick that box, we've hit the right target. Now, we always felt that the kingmaker, and in this case it did turn out to be a kingmaker, would have been Carolyn Maroney. Because when she came 3rd, she would drop off the ballot after Tanya, and then her votes would have to be reapportioned. And when we kicked off and we were doing our voter tracking on this, we felt that we were at 25%. So it looked like only like 2 weeks into this, with 2 weeks to go, 2 weeks to go, we would have got 25% of Maroney's votes. And we felt that would be just not enough, because this election was always going to be a squeaker. It was going to be very close. Too close to call.
It was going to be close between Doug Ford and Christine Elliott, as
yes.
per the polls and consensus of.
Well, our internal polls were showing that. The other polls were all over the place. I mean, there was a Capital Research poll that showed that Elliott was way ahead, and other polls that showed other things. But our internal poll was very consistent. It showed that it would be Elliott and Doug 1-2. It would be then Maroney, and then it would be Tanya. That was how we tracked it. In the latter stages, certainly since the second debate, it looked as though Tanya was trending down, Tanya was trending up, and Mulroney was trending down.
Absolutely, with their performance and their delivery. So, and then we fast forward to the third ballot, where Caroline Mulroney drops off, and then Doug Ford wins on the third ballot by 6,202 points, and Christine Elliott by 6,049 points.
Well, two things here. First of all, we got 45% of Mulroney's votes. Tick the box, game over. At that point, we've won. But there was an issue with 1,300 votes that were unknowns. Now, I must tell you, we had our campaign had picked that up. George Hadfield had picked that up. He has a system for tracking this. I never understand, but he's a techie. So he found that there were these 1,300 votes, and he brought them to my attention, and we agreed that we should track them. We should find out which ridings they're in. And he did that. He found out which ridings they were in. It's a 50-50 chance.
So you had essentially prepared for what would have been a potential issue, which was an issue on this last Saturday at the PC Party convention.
It became an issue, and I must tell you, we had taken it to their attention. We didn't tell them that we knew which ridings they were in, but we knew which ridings they were in because George, as I said, we agreed we would track them, and we did. And out of those 1,300, the majority turned out to be Doug Ford supporters. So two things here. One is that when they actually voted, because there's a 50-50 chance, many of those 1,300 fell into the right, into the right riding. I think there were 1,050 that fell into the right riding.
Yeah.
I suppose it's not happen chance. I think what it is, it's not happen chance. It is a statistical fact that if it's a 50-50 chance, then if you have as many as 1,300, a great majority of that will fall into the right riding and 50% vote. So we had up to 1,000 falling into the right riding by fluke, if you like. But they did fall into the right riding.
Right, because I recall full disclosure, I worked on the campaign, which I will get to. I do recall that they had riding names, even though it was identified as unknown per riding number, but there was an address. You could actually pinpoint where that was. You could find which riding it was in. And as I said, we did that. We tracked it. We knew that most of them were Doug supporters anyway. And that's why over this ridiculous time period between when Doug should have been out there and being applauded by all the people and having his moment, it was being challenged. And yet, if they had done their work, they would have known what this problem was all about. Absolutely. Joe, thank you so much for breaking down the entire process of what happened, how the system actually works in terms of the voting, what happened behind the scenes on the ground operations, and how we got, our leader elected and how the win was done. And it's great to hear that there was so much strategy, going in terms of going for the right electoral votes, as well as preparing for any of the glitches that a computer system may not have picked up. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Likewise. As you hear from Joe Reese, who was the Director of Field Operations, that's exactly what happened on the campaign in this short period of time to deliver the win. And as I had said, full disclosure, I was involved in this leadership campaign as well, in terms of running the telecom services and voter ID and the internal polling and texting. And here's what I can predict. Having looked at the statistics and having talked to, we had one contact at least with over 200,000 PC party members. When you have, the other leaders of the party, such as the Liberal leader Kathleen Wynne, who's our premier, as well as Andrew Horwath, the NDP leader, saying that Doug Ford is a divisive character and therefore he may not be able to deliver a win for the PC party come an election in just less than 13 weeks on June 7th of this year. What I could say statistically in terms of reaching out to the base and doing internal polls for the campaign, as well as the messages we got back through the phone calls, through the walk-ins in the campaign, as well as the texting, is that his base actually wasn't able to come out and vote. And what I mean by his base, I don't just mean by a PC base or a conservative base. Doug Ford seems to attract a multiple of base that is the disenfranchised, the never voted, first-time voters. An influx of people became members just to be able to vote for him. And then he also attracts NDPs and Liberals and even swing voters. So when you hear that he's just a Toronto figure, it was contradictory to his campaign trail, where he went all over the province and was able to pack the room anywhere from 200 to 500 people per riding. And what resonated with people was that he spoke to them in their own language in terms of talking about no more taxes, being able to make Ontario an economic engine, being able to bring foreign investments in, such as manufacturing jobs, attracting all kinds of money into the system and cutting the waste that there is. And when they asked him, if you cut carbon tax, which was, he was the first to lead it, when you cut carbon tax, how are you going to pay for everything else you want to deliver on the campaign platform, such as the People's Guarantee? And one thing that I found very interesting that, you heard radio people talk about and on the television, and just the average person, he went around asking, do you think there's at least 2% of waste that can be, cut on the provincial spending? And everybody laughed and said there's more than 2%. So what he was able to identify is that there's so much waste in terms of spending that if he were to cut it out without losing jobs, which is what him and his brother, previous mayor of Toronto, Rob Ford, were able to do in terms of cut $1 billion of waste and not cut a single job by putting people in the right departments, that it can be accomplished. So I would have to beg the difference and really, consider that, is he really that divisive figure that the other parties are talking about, or is he the candidate that has actually has united the base in terms of the social conservatives coming back into the PC party, attracting voters that would never have become a member, and everybody else who still wants to vote and will come out to vote? I hope that gave you a good perspective on actually how this leadership was done and how the race happened behind the scenes. There was a lot of speculation, there was a lot of news covering, every angle of then leader Patrick Brown coming into the race and leaving, and there was so much speculation. But for the viewers, you watching at home, it's important to know what actually happens, and that you actually are in the driving seat of electing your next leader. Your vote is very expensive. If you forego your vote coming this June election and actually getting involved with your local campaigns and reaching out to understand what the issues are and actually escalating them as your candidates come and reach out to you, you will know that you're in the driving seat. It was the voters that were able to pick their leader of the PC party, and again, it'll come down to the voters that'll be able to pick the premier of Ontario come June 7th. My name is Ramona Benson. I'm very happy to be with you, and this was The Real Talk with Ramona Benson. Until next week, when we come back with other serious issues and behind the scenes, I look forward to seeing you then.